Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel, and tonight I want to talk to you about rage. Every football gamer knows that these games induce rage at various levels and in all different areas of the game in different ways. And I wanted to go through, because I play each and every football game, and talk to you about the rankings for every area of the game as far as the rage-inducing nonsense we have to deal with. And despite this, we still play for the love of football gaming. So, with that being said, there's going to be 6 different categories of rage that we discussed tonight. Server/connections, gameplay, opponents/community, AI for both team opponents as well as just general AI in the game, developers, as well as menus. We will take these grand totals from 10 being perfect, absolutely no rage in this area, to 0 being completely break everything rage-inducing craziness. Then we will see what is the most rage-inducing football game out of the big 3, which is EAFC, UFL, and eFOOTBALL. So, without further ado, let's get started. And the last thing I wanted to preface is that 10 out of 10 perfect doesn't exist. The highest I give is 9.5, just because nothing is absolutely perfect, right? Some of these areas, the games do a great job at making, the experience smooth and just almost a 10 out of 10 experience. But even then, we'll give it a 9.5, so there's room for improvement. Whereas every single one of these games has at least one area where it just drives you crazy. I mean, it is almost automatically rage-inducing, but each game also has redeeming qualities. So that's what I wanted to go into tonight, because a lot of times when I'm streaming, I notice it can, fluctuate from a great experience to a negative experience, and then this can also vary between, the different parts of the game I'm in. Whether it's, I'm controlling the ball in one game, it's just fantastic gameplay, great movement, and you're completely content, to, the next second, the opponent gets the ball, and just the way your AI works maybe will drive you crazy, and you're mad, and then you're happy again because you're in the menus, and one of the games just has great content, great organization, and then next thing you know, you're going crazy because, for instance, in EAFC, like the menus crash like they do every now and then. So anyway, with that being said, I just wanted to preface these scores before I went into it, and kind of my breakdown of how I got these going. So first off, we're going to talk about server connection, because each of these games, there's a varying level of rage that gets induced when you start having the dreaded lag and delay. And in football games, lag delay is really, can really affect the game, because it's such a fast-moving game. You're controlling, 11 different players while also trying to watch the opponent's 11 players. So any type of, situation where that's being thrown off because the commands aren't, reacting exactly when you press them, it's going to throw you off. So with that being said, starting with EAFC, I gave this a 4 out of 10 because their servers are terrible. I mean, each and every stream, it seems like, especially lately, it's just a terrible experience, not because of the way the game is playing or anything in game. It's because of the servers. But the game is responsible for their own servers too, so it's not like it's the internet connection or just the internet in general. It is literally the game servers, and for this, without a doubt, the only reason EAFC even gets as high as a 4 is because they have these certain times, which again, post-patch, it seemed like it, more often than not, you were having good, gaming experience, but lately it's been getting worse and worse, and closer to the FIFA/FC of old, where every time you turn on the game, you just didn't know, even from game to game or half to half even within a game, the experience can change based on the amount of server lag, delay, in the commands. You press shoot, and instead of going off right away like usual, it's like a half a second delay, and it just totally changes the experience. It totally changes, the outcome of the game. A 5-6 nothing win typically with lag delay can become a 1-2 nothing loss or even worse. So 4 out of 10 for EAFC in that area. For UFL, I went 7.5 out of 10 because they're a brand new game, but typically speaking, you're not going to get bad lag experiences. However, there are times where when it is bad, it's really bad. I'm talking drop frames, I believe they call it, where you're going and the screen just freezes and then comes back, and next thing you know, your player's like 5 yards further ahead. You're getting ready to shoot the ball. The game just totally freezes up. And then obviously there is that nonsense with the disconnections. So otherwise, it would have been like a 9 overall, but because of that, I guess you could call it isolated incidents. Are those isolated incidents? It gets dropped to a 7.5. It could have maybe went lower at times, but because the disconnect issues seem to have been taken care of for the most part, we'll go 7.5 out of 10, although I'm not counting against them those disconnect cheats that go on where you would be, running down the field, you have the ball in a favorable position, and the opponent would be able to disconnect, reconnect. They took the situation out of the game where if you clipped anything, the game would drop and you would automatically lose the game. But there are from time to time those situations where you still will face those players. You're in on a breakaway and it will disconnect, or they're in on a breakaway and they'll disconnect and come back, because if they control it and they know exactly when they're coming back, if you take your finger off the whatever command was going on when the game disconnect before it comes back, it'll throw you off. So anyway, but again, that was more isolated incidents, so we'll still give them a 7.5 out of 10 because it's nowhere near as bad as EAFC as far as how consistently the delay, the bad connection, the disconnects happen. And then eFootball, as close to perfect as you can get. Yes, from time to time you'll get some slower commands, reactions, stuff like that. Never any drop frames or anything, at least that I've experienced. Yes, I played this game the least out of the 3, even though it's not, newer than, UFL is the newest game, but I still played UFL more. eFootball is a pretty new experience, but many times I'm playing players that are definitely not anywhere near me. Like, definitely in a different country. And even with this being said, despite having much closer proximity opponents in, say, EAFC, I still get near perfect connection with eFootball. So for eFootball, they get a 9.5 out of 10 on server connection. Barely any rage will come from, delay or anything like that. Whereas the opposite of that would be EAFC, which is absolutely terrible a lot of times. It can cause a lot of rage. I mean, nearly throw your controller through the screen type of rage in EAFC. So kudos to eFootball. They easily take the cake in this category. Next, we are going to talk about gameplay, which includes everything that happens on the pitch, from passing to shooting, dribbling, any exploits that might happen, any type of different glitches that might happen that could be absolutely rage-inducing. We will take all of that, anything on the pitch, and that will be under this gameplay category. And how we will do this is we will start off with the previous category's winner and go in decreasing order from there. So, for instance, we'll start with eFootball, who took the server connection category with the best score of 9.5, and in gameplay, they get a 7.5. Now, the reason why it's 7.5 and not higher is because, yes, they are a unique experience in the fact that they're more AI-driven than, their FC and UFL counterparts. However, some of the AI and some of the commands in the way they kind of program the game absolutely drive you crazy. For instance, there is no manual control of runs. So when your players are, for instance, in a certain setup, let's say long ball counter or even quick counter, and they're making long runs away from the ball, yes, you can quick cancel, I guess, or super cancel as it's called, and try to cancel the AI run to call them back to the ball. But the fact that you can play a long ball that will be going right alongside the player as they're in a current AI run, and they'll just keep watching the ball run alongside them, that's insane to me. I mean, the amount of detail and the amount of AI work Konami does, you would think they could make it to where the AI would, change up their run a little bit and go towards the ball. I mean, the ball could literally be running right next to them, or it could be right behind them, and they will not turn and come to. They won't change up the direction of their runs. And realistically, players don't just start running away from the ball and don't change their runs when they realize, oh, maybe I need to show to now. Or when they're showing to the ball, they don't just keep running towards you even if they realize they need to turn up the field. I wish that would be changed, because there's no ability to player lock or manually change the direction of, your AI teammates' runs. So that's the biggest part that I don't like. Not to mention some of the wonky things, like you can kick the ball off and take a shot from near midfield, and it will be an absolute rope that the goalie has to parry to the side. The defensive side, how overpowered it is, holding that pressure button or even the AI press, they just get this crazy speed boost defensively, and if you're not prepared for it, you won't even get a pass off. So certain things like that are why, even though a lot of like the player models with the animations added to those are very realistic in eFootball. I mean, the movements, like a Mo Salah is going to look like a Mo Salah. Haaland's going to look like a Haaland. Some of the finishes, some of the passing sequences, they come off beautifully. So it's almost a situation of extremes where eFootball can look so beautiful and have such beautiful gameplay when everything goes right. But then, on the other end, there's some goofy things that leave you absolutely raging. So 7.5 overall for eFootball. Moving on to UFL. As far as the gameplay goes, they get a 5. Now, I'll just let you know, even before we get to EAFC, UFL takes the cake for the most rage-inducing as far as gameplay goes. Yes, they are the newest game, but at initial release, even with some of the goofy glitches and stuff, I would have given them about a 7, 7.5, because they did very good at having open, free-flowing gameplay. But since then, every patch they've done almost makes the game worse. I mean, you can take 30, 40-yard rifle finesse shots in the upper corner, but then if you're on a breakaway, the same animation triggers with the keeper, and they'll save it every time. Post hitting is happening over and over. Many times the ball will hit the goalie. Not the goalie makes a save, but the ball will hit the goalie. We've had times where you purposely would strategize to shoot at the goalie, because the same, type of parry would occur, and the ball automatically went to, one of the attacking team's wingers for a tap-in. Just a lot of craziness. So the gameplay, it's in a very bad spot right now for UFL. So they get a 5 on Rage Inducing. You will absolutely want to break something when you are playing UFL at least several times a game, if not the entire game, fluidly, wanting to just go out of your mind with rage. Last but not least, EAFC. Now this is post-patch. Pre-patch, it would have been a much worse score. But post-patch, we're going to give them a 9 out of 10. Near perfect on the gameplay now. The defense is almost completely manual, so there is a skill now in defending, whereas before it was completely broken. Yes, it is a very quick-moving game, but you can make some beautiful passing plays, right? The defense is able to move fluently. You're able to player switch very quickly, both in attack, whether you're using player lock or manually changing directions of your run. It is the only game that has player lock. And so just everything combined from the AI mixed with the manual, input that it takes. Obviously, server connection is a separate category, so we're not going to talk about, when all these things are delayed due to that, which ruins the experience. But when the gameplay is going how it is meant to be, and you have a free-flowing game, there's nothing better right now than FC by far. So they take the cake with this category with a 9 out of 10. Nearly no rage will be induced as far as just the gameplay aspect of EAFC. And moving on to our next category, we have opponents and community. We are talking you go into a PvP match, and how is the experience with your opponent? We all know this many times can absolutely be rage-inducing, and it's at different levels depending on which football game you are playing. So, EAFC won the previous category, and in this category, as far as opponents and community, they get a 5 out of 10. We all know, or if you don't, I'm telling you now, EAFC, formerly FIFA, has a notoriously toxic player base. I'm talking, you go into a game, and since it is the only game where a player can leave at a tie, and, the other player will not get a win. eFOOTBALL, UFL, the player's trying to play a game, the opponent leaves at a tie, you still get to win, but even though the opponent gets the loss still, like in every game, for some reason, the other player in EAFC has to suffer and the game just doesn't count. Since the player base, knows this, obviously in EAFC, you will have opponents that are trailing the game 1-0, play harder than they ever have, better than they did, the entire game previously, just to tie the game knowing they're going to leave and suffer a loss anyway, but they just want a total stranger to not get the win. So think about how toxic you have to be to do that. Not to mention, even though the exploits are better post-patch, historically speaking, EAFC players are some of the most exploitative, some of the most ratty player base, as a whole. There are obviously good players out there, but as a whole, as far as rage-inducing behavior caused from your opponents, the community, EAFC easily gets a 5 out of 10, and it could maybe be worse. It's just with this post-patch, there's not as many exploits, so it doesn't stand out as bad. Moving on to UFL, another terribly toxic player base that it's only gotten more and more toxic as Strikers, the developer, has moved more towards a rat, welcoming type of gameplay. Because the more rats you have, the more rage-inducing it's going to be, the more toxic it's going to be. And it couldn't be more toxic right now with UFL, so they actually surpass EAFC with a 4 out of 10 as far as rage-inducing caused by your opponents. And last but not least, eFOOTBALL, which in my opinion is a clear winner in this category. They actually get an 8.5 out of 10 because there is by far the least amount of rats, the least amount of exploits in eFOOTBALL. And being new to this game, I've had a ton of community coaching, and it absolutely has helped me a ton. Just either opponents or just players in chat, things like that, willing to help out, even though it doesn't help them at all. Even if it's, that you just played them and either beat them or they beat you. The community in general is a very welcoming and a very good community. I'm not saying I haven't played rats. I absolutely have. Players that constantly just want to keep the ball in the air to flick on with players that they have with skill sets that make them better in the air. Players that go for kick. There's a kickoff glitch in eFOOTBALL. Players that constantly just shoot the ball everywhere and go for rebounds. They're rats, but it is by far the lowest amount of each game. So for this category, eFOOTBALL wins with an 8.5 out of 10. Very low amount of rage induced, as opposed to both EAFC and UFL. The player base is going to make you want to break things. Like I said, you will want to fight your opponents, literally. Total strangers, you will wish you could meet them and fight them, even if you're the most peaceful person in the world. So, moving on to the next category, we have AI. And that's just in general. Like, you have AI that helps you on your team. You have the opponent's AI. And just general, when you're going up against the AI teams for different, challenges and stuff, we gave that a total score because without a doubt, the AI in these football games can and will cause you to rage. So starting with the previous category winner, eFOOTBALL, who is a very AI-driven game, but this score might surprise you. I went 8 out of 10. It is still a good score, and it would be better because overall, for an AI-driven game, they do a great job. It's just something I mentioned earlier. Some of the run making, it's almost insane because, like I said, the ball will be right next to the player, particularly on offense. The ball's going to be right next to the player, and they won't change up their run. I know a lot of this has to do with the programming, right? But that's AI. So it will drive you crazy in a game when you have a player running 2 inches from the ball and they won't change their course of their run to get the ball, right? And there's no player lock or manually changing the direction to kind of assist this. Therefore, even though overall the AI is very good in eFootball, like I said, some of the animations, the way they make the players look like their real life counterparts are incredible. So that counters it pretty good. We'll go with 8 out of 10 for the AI category. Moving on to EAFC, I put them just behind eFootball as far as the rage induced by the AI because there's more manual influence in the game. So even though the AI is better with eFootball, EAFC kind of masks that with the ability to, for instance, player lock. You can manually control your runs, or you can change the directions and manipulate the AI runs. So it kind of helps, especially on the attacking side. And since defense is more manual than any of the other football games, that takes away the rage that could come from AI. I would say the reason why they don't get a higher AI score, because then that would make, any AI runs, for instance, because of attacking awareness, defensive positioning, stuff like that, it would make it good then, right? Well, the goalkeepers are what brings it down. They, time and time again, can drive you crazy, and therefore the score goes to a 7 out of 10. I'm talking, you pull your goalie all the way out, they could jump on the ball easily, and for some reason they just dive an inch short and the attacker's able to dribble around you and score, or they make some goofy dive where they easily could have made the save. I mean, goalkeepers, time and time again, you'll see, you go look at any review on like Footbin, for instance, for EAFC, you'll see goalkeepers in their AI can drive players crazy and cause them to rage without a doubt, and do cause players to rage actively. That has never changed, so they get a 7 out of 10. Now moving on to UFL and sticking with goalkeepers AI as far as the AI rage-inducing category in general, we are going to give them a 6.5 overall with some other AI blunders that UFL has, just because similar to EAFC, the goalies in UFL will drive you crazy. Not to mention there's some instances of just complete crazy glitchy movements that will have you scratching your head. A lot of this comes with the fact, I will say, in my opinion, UFL being a brand new game and the developers still working out some of these kinks, but nonetheless, they knew they were coming to compete against the big boys, these big developing companies that have been around in this football gaming space. So you have to judge them on an even playing field. Therefore, they just get a bit lower. It's a bit more rage-inducing, rage caused by the AI and UFL. Therefore, I give them a 6.5 out of 10, just barely losing this category, or having the worst score, I should say, out of the 3 football games. In the next category, we are talking about the developers. Konami for eFootball, EA Sports for EAFC, and Strikers for UFL. The winner of the previous AI category was eFootball, therefore they will start first. And as far as the developers go, I will just preface by saying all 3 show signs of greed. All 3 show signs of just manipulation of their player base to try to get money, which of course ties into greed. And so this is the biggest part that causes rage as far as developers. But this also can include things like the way they make announcements, the way they release content, the type of content, right? The different modes, just all these things combined that have the developers causing rage on the player base. So starting with eFootball, one of the worst things for me is the way they do their promos or whatever it is. The way you can essentially pay to get 3 top tier players, but they're essentially telling you like, oh yeah, it's a chance you can pull these players quickly, but if you just give us $200, $250, whatever it is, you can get all 150 players, which guarantees you these. Right? They might as well just put the players out there like they do for some. For instance, there's a $5 Fernando Torres. He's $5 worth in coins. So you go buy the $5 in coins, you get Fernando Torres. They might as well do it with these other players. It's kind of nonsense. Yes, sometimes you can get them for a bit cheaper. My Maldini ended up costing me literally $50. Maybe if I paid an extra 100. I could have got for sure all three of the players. So maybe it was worth it to get Maldini, but for an extra 100, I essentially could have got Thuram and Xabi Alonso, which would make it about $50 a piece. I've seen other instances. I talk about this all the time, but I thought it was crazy watching Nick Runs the Foot Market. I think he put like $200. I could be wrong on that number. Don't quote me on the details, but he paid a lot of money just to get one Gareth Bale card. Now, you do get to keep the player forever, but it absolutely is rage-inducing when you turn on the game, see these amazing players, and just know that the way Konami's doing it, you're going to have to fork up a good chunk of money just to hopefully get one. I mean, there's a chance you put in, let's say, 50, 70, 80, 90 bucks and still get nothing at all. And the way they do it, there's no transfer market or any type of market at all. So it's just 80 bucks to get nothing. Literally, like throwing it down the drain if you don't pull one of the three players, which is a max amount of like top, epic level players that you can get. There's other supposedly good players in the pack, but so far for me, I've always sold any of the other players that aren't in that marquee top 3 list. Therefore, for developers, the score that I'm giving eFootball is a 6 out of 10. Next, we have EA Sports, the maker of the oldest running football game, which is FIFA, well, formerly FIFA, now FC. We all know their track record. I mean, they are infamous as a development company for being greedy, for just being terrible at communication, just every negative you can think of as far as a video game developer. EA Sports has been in the headlines for that. Therefore, I'm not even going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to give them their score of a 3 out of 10. By far, they take the cake as the most rage-inducing development company. Now, have they been better lately? Have they took a turn for the better? Yes, but they absolutely hit rock bottom as far as just no trust in the player base, as far as the player base just hating them. And I believe they're, without a doubt, the most hated video game development company. Not just football games, but in general. So they get a 3 out of 10 as far as they will absolutely cause rage and do cause rage within the player base. And last but not least, UFL developers, which is Strikers. They unfortunately are new, but with a lot of the things that have happened already, they have showed a ton of sort of cash grab type of situations, as well as showing a lot of greed themselves. The communication part, they started off really good, communicating great with the player base, and then they got to a point where now you have like the CEO on his personal Twitter account. That's like the best place to get updates, but you won't find anything on the main websites for the socials or even the main game site. Just some of the nonsense in the way they answer things. I seen a community manager on Discord actually like arguing and being a smartass to a player that was generally asking questions to try to help improve the game. Just a lot of nonsense. In a short time, they've already shown just a lot of negatives. So they get a 4 out of 10. Therefore, the winner of this category is actually Konami with eFootball, getting a 6 out of 10. UFL just edges EA Sports 4 to a score of 3 for EA Sports and EAFC. And that's only because, EA Sports has been around longer. But I would say that Strikers, from what they've shown, is on the path to being almost as hated. Maybe not quite, but in that realm of hatred, similar to that of EA Sports. Hopefully they can make a turn for the right direction, get on the right path, I should say, as far as, getting a better relationship with the player base as they go. EA Sports, like I said, has took a turn for the better, but historically speaking, they've done so much negative. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of good deeds, if you will, before EA Sports is in the good graces with the player base. So now we move on to our last category, which is menus, and to a lesser extent than the other categories, but make no mistake about it, menus can and do cause rage for the players. Starting with eFootball, we won't beat around the bush. 6.5 out of 10 on the eFootball menus. They're very old school, but not in a good way. I've heard another content creator call them, just for a reference, the menus of eFootball look like an old school phone book with 7,000 pages, right? It literally is just out of date as far as the look goes. Again, you can have an old school, more nostalgic look that is cool, but eFootball's menus are not that. They're old school in a bad way. Like, yeah, this is why we updated menus on these games. And then just the layers of each of the menus, they need to be able to fast track and just totally slim down and make the menus sharper, especially for this day and age. So hopefully that comes soon, because the menus are terrible in eFootball. I would say where they can cause rages for me, like a newcomer, I'm just trying to get to like the team pass, or I'm just trying to get to, this area to look at my players, or release players from my roster to get GP, and it's just like a whole thing that you have to remember. I just want to get into the special player list, and I have to like go through this whole thing to get to it. They could easily streamline the menus, and so they get a 6.5 out of 10. Moving on to UFL, I'll just tell you they get a 9 out of 10 here. It's a little unfair because they barely have anything in their menus, so of course it's going to be very little rage coming from the menus in UFL when there's not much to click through. 1 or 2 clicks and you're where you want to be. However, aside from the fact that there's not much to click through in the menus, they have shown that they can have a pretty sleek, simple, but attractive look, let's call it. They just added a playoffs player versus AI mode, and they shown how attractive their game modes can be with this, tying to the same type of look as their general menus, right? It's very eye-catching, but again, simplistic and easy to click through. So if they stick with this route that they're going, which I have no reason to believe they won't, they'll stay in that upper score area as far as just very low to no rage, very sleek and easy to click through menus for UFL. Last but not least, EAFC, which this one's a little different because while I think they could absolutely do better with their menus, they try to make like this almost quick scrolling system because there's just a lot to click through. It's been the longest standing football video game and by far has the most depth. So you got to take that into consideration when you're talking about the menus. They have a lot more to kind of organize in their menus. But why I say it's a little bit different is because this is the only game out of the 3 football games that has constantly crashing menus, which absolutely causes the most rage, right? Nobody likes being in the middle of doing something, such as you're in the middle of completing an SBC and the game just crashes, so you have to leave and restart. And then when you go in, you've put like maybe 8 out of 11 players in an SBC, and you realize because it crashed, you have to restart and put those players in all over again. So without a doubt, this type of experience will be rage-inducing. Similar to their servers, which this honestly, the crashing could be associated with their servers. It's just part of, the menu is a different type of situation. Because with the servers, despite the lag and the delay, the game rarely, if ever, crashes. However, the menu crashes all the time. So maybe it's related to the servers, maybe it's not. The score is 7.5 out of 10, just because overall, with having so much to click through, right? They did a pretty good job. Like I said earlier, they have like a quick scrolling menu. They did good there. So while I definitely understand they have the most to click through and it's not the most confusing, they can do better. Therefore, EAFC's menu score is 7.5 with regards to how much rage this can cause. And almost all of that, negative score comes from the crashing of the menus. Now, that concludes all of the categories. As you can see, each and every one, the games cause rage in a higher and lower extent. When you look at it as a whole, it's almost crazy we play these games with how much stress and rage and just nonsense that can be caused in these different areas. When you combine them, makes for a pretty stressful experience at times. But if you want to play football still and you would want to play the least rage-inducing game, you would end up playing eFootball, which gets a 7.6 out of 10 as far as the overall rage, or lack of rage experience in playing the game. Next in line, it is neck and neck, but UFL edges out EAFC with just 0.1 less rage caused, meaning they get a 6.1 out of 10, and that's largely being that they are a newer game. So they haven't had as much time to cause as much stress as EAFC. But I mean, when you're in the menus and they're crashing, then you get into a game and you have server delay. Then you get into playing somebody and they leave at a tie and totally waste your time. Or someone using exploits back before the patch. There's just on and on and on. So yes, it might be because they've been around the longest and there's just the most intricacies. But either way, UFL not going in the right direction. However, their score still says, at least on my metrics, that they are just a bit less rage-inducing than EAFC, which came out with a 6 flat. So you could argue that 0.1's not enough to call UFL the winner. However, on one side, and this is the side I would go with for a tiebreaker, I would say EA Sports has had years and years more to fix these different categories and make these experiences better for their player base and less rage-inducing. And while they've taken a turn for going in the right direction, it just hasn't been enough at all. So on the other side, to play devil's advocate, you could say that strikers in UFL just haven't had a long enough time to make themselves the most rage-inducing game, but they're going in that direction. And if you said that, I couldn't say you were wrong. Either way, though, there's a clear-cut winner as far as the least rage-inducing game, and that is Konami's eFOOTBALL, so congrats to them. In summary, all football games cause rage. Probably all video games to more or less extent, but sometimes there is no doubt that you would be looking at yourself going, why am I even playing this? It's so stressful. It makes me so mad. I've noticed it with myself, especially with the streams, because I'm really speaking these things out loud to explain them to any viewers, all these things that are going on. And as I'm doing that, I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, man, this can be a pretty terrible experience, to the point where you're like, why don't I just turn this off and go find peace doing something else? But myself, just like all of you, we love football gaming. Therefore, we just gotta either play the game and accept this as part of it, or find a new hobby. For me, I'm going to be raging on, trying to work on it, but I know, I'm just, why lie? I'm going to be honest. There's going to be more rage at opponents, at menus, at AI, at all of it. But I love football gaming. I love football in general, and I love all of you guys. So keep grinding, keep having fun, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.